Hi everyone, I've angled my camera differently today. I film in this room quite a lot, but normally I angle things so that you just have the white wall behind me, but it's just so boring. So, I mean, you have the excitement of this cushion behind me, so, you know, let's all appreciate that. I'd love to film by my bookcase, but it's really echoey in there. Do let me know. Do you find it distracting when I film with my bookcase, which sometimes I do, because it's an echoey room? I'd love to know. I hope you're all okay. As I film this, we're just about to go into the second lockdown, so that will have started when this video goes up. So, sending you all good vibes. I'm personally feeling a bit more positive about this one than I was about the last one, but yeah, just sending all of you affected by that good vibes, and just everyone, because this is a weird time. Feels a bit like surreal. Yeah, what do you guys think? It's like I watch the news or I think of the last few months and I just find the whole thing so weird. Anyway, the reason I'm filming today is because I would like to talk to you about everything that I read in October. I read 6 books in October, which is a lot for me, and I want to tell you about them. I'm going to try and do it in order, but actually looking at them, I can't remember what order I read them in. So that will go well. Let's go with, I think I read this one first. Right. Sorry if these aren't in the right order. You can follow me on Goodreads to see the books as I read them. I usually review them. I put quite short reviews on there, or on Instagram I also do little reviews of my books. Right, so the first one I think was Between the Stops, The View of My Life from the Top of the Number 12 Bus by Sandi Toksvig. This was a gift from my brother and his wife for my birthday. I've already reviewed a few of the books that they bought me, and I've still got a couple, about 3 I think, that I haven't read. I'm not sure. Anyway, this one, this is an autobiography of Sandi Toksvig's life, which I don't know if I would have picked it up, but I am interested. I really like the things that Sandi Toksvig does, and I really like her TED talk, which I will link below. I think she's had a very interesting life, which I kind of hadn't reflected on until my brother gave me this, and I was like, well, actually, that will be a really interesting read. So, Sandi Toksvig was born in Denmark. She then moved to America and spent a long time in America and had an American accent. She then was sent to boarding school in the UK, so she then got the kind of quite posh English accent that she has now. So she's had this sort of interesting movement between different countries and the experience of boarding school. And then in this book she talks about going to university. So she went to Cambridge, I think. I'm suddenly doubting it and thinking it's Oxford, but I'm pretty sure it's Cambridge. And she came out as a lesbian in a time when people weren't. So she talks about that and kind of her experience of growing up and having relationships during that time. So it's just really, really interesting. She's had a fascinating life, and she talks a lot. She's very much an enthusiast about theatre and film and production, and so the things she has to say about that are interesting too. What's also really good is she weaves all of that into bus journeys. So she's taking the number 12 bus from somewhere to somewhere. I forget, but it goes all through like Peckham and Camberwell and sort of gradually comes into central London. Now, I've taken this bus through London a number of times, so, and I know some of these areas a little bit. So she also adds in these little facts and interesting things like people who lived in certain areas, or interesting stuff that happened in just areas of London that I wouldn't even necessarily think to stop and look at. And she takes this sort of meandering bus route and gets off the bus and looks at things and talks about those and then links them into her life. So it's such an interesting way of writing a memoir, as well as she has so much, just so much interesting stuff to say. The things that would particularly stand out for me were her experience of, well, effectively she didn't come out, she was outed, and the response was so bad that she went into hiding, and that is just heartbreaking. It is a story I'd heard before though, but you know, that was just very illuminating to like how things are now. Not that things are by any means perfect, but just in comparison was very interesting. And then also a certain thing that happens in this book that she talks about at university, and linked to her sexuality, the things that occurred at uni. And so I don't want to spoil it, but that was also really emotional. So I've really enjoyed this. If you like Sandi Toksvig, I definitely would recommend having a look at this. I thought it was really well written, interesting, not only about her, but also about London and the things she's done, the things she's experienced, but lots of facts about them, as you'd expect. So I liked it. I recommend that one. Then I think I read... What should we go for? I don't know, these are going to be completely in the wrong order. Let's say this one, The Five, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold. I've seen this book being talked about a lot online, and I was really interested in it. I had like a promotional bookmark for it, and I put it on my Goodreads as a want to read, and just didn't get around to buying it. So I decided to get myself a little treat, and this was one of the things that I bought. So I actually bought myself a book. It's unheard of, and you know, a new book. Who would have thought? So this was amazing. I read this in a couple of days, and it's quite dense, so I'm pretty proud of myself. It's about the 5 women who are called the canonical, that's not a word, the canon something, the like, oh, there's a word for it, but the women who are generally agreed to have been the victims of Jack the Ripper. And everybody's heard of Jack the Ripper, but not many people have heard of the women that he killed. And these women were dismissed as prostitutes, basically, and so were kind of treated as not worthy of having a story, you know. And I mean, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you their names before I read this book. And, you know, it's like Jack the Ripper is the interesting one and not the women that were his victims. So I found that a really interesting concept. So the women are Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine and Mary Jane. So the book starts off by giving you a bit of background about Jack the Ripper, about the kind of circumstances surrounding the deaths of these women, what was going on in society at the time, what conditions were like, that kind of thing. And it then goes through each of the women and talks through as much as is known about their lives, and then extrapolating that to things that were typical. So if they don't know something about about a facet of their lives, then Hallie Rubenhold goes into what typically would have been the experience. For example, I need a drink. And then she kind of goes through the women's lives, and then particularly their kind of movements and experiences in the days and hours leading up to their murder. Their actual murder is a tiny part of this book. It's, you know, that's almost the footnote to this book. It's not about that, it's about their lives. And it's so fascinating because what this book shows you is how these women were so failed by society, so completely and utterly failed in the things that happened to them, in the circumstances they ended up in. And it really goes through kind of how they got themselves into the situations that they were. So a lot of these women were in and out of the workhouse, they were sleeping rough, they were just really poor and living in the worst conditions. And I think only one of them was actually a prostitute, but it was kind of misinformation, that it was a convenient story, basically. So it's just fascinating. It's a fascinating look at Victorian society, but without all of the like, wow, the Victorians were amazing. But actually, this is like the depths of society and giving them a voice, people who don't ordinarily have a voice. And so interesting, obviously really heartbreaking, but it's a brilliant feminist read, and it's just very illuminating in lots of ways. Really interesting. I loved it. I loved it. Definitely pick this up. It is so good. So loved that one. Glad I treated myself to it, because I will most likely read that again, which is my criterion for buying a book new for myself. So next up, I think, was this one, which I also bought for myself. So this is MumLife by Louise Pentland. So Louise Pentland is a YouTuber. I've been watching her probably since about 2013, 2014, thereabouts, when I started watching YouTube. She has gone from having quite a lot of kind of bubbly, fun content and being like one of the Brit crew, to now making lots of motherhood content, and she's also started making business content, which I love. So she talks about an investment property that she has, and like her office and designing her office space and money, and she's just starting to go into that, and I have a lot of time and respect for that. I love how her content has evolved as her life has evolved. I find her very entertaining to watch. So I have watched Louise Pentland for years. I read her book Wild Like Me, I think, is that the first one? And it just wasn't for me. Like, that's all I can say. I don't really read women's fiction, so I picked it up because I like her. I did not like the book, it's just not my kind of thing. But when I saw she was bringing this out, I definitely was interested, and I had my eye on it. So this book is effectively a memoir of her, all the things that are related to her being a mother. So her relationships, her growing up, and I mean that's why I was interested in this book, because one of my particular interests is early parenting, and so it was like combining someone that I find entertaining to watch with stuff that I'm interested in. So she goes through in the book sort of all those different parts of her life. So I read the majority of this book when I had a stinking cold. I couldn't breathe properly. You know when you're bored and you just want to go to sleep and you're annoyed, and and I read most of this book during that night and then finished it off the next day. And it was the perfect book to read because it's not too... Although some of the stuff covered in it is pretty heavy, it's not like dense or difficult, or it's quite easy reading, really. And because it's quite emotional but up and down, funny, and it just felt like quite a warm book to read when you just need something like that. So it was the perfect thing. I rate my books based on how much I enjoyed them, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Just a couple of tiny criticisms, really, that, as I say, still enjoyed it. One was that a lot of the stories that are in here she has already told on her channel. Not all of them, there was loads of new stuff, but there was also quite a lot of stuff she's already said, which I suppose is inevitable, but if you're expecting a book that's all new content, it's not. They're all still great stories, but like her dating stories, for example, which are funny, but a lot of them she shared before. So if you're somebody that's watched Louise for a long time and have watched a lot of her videos, there may be a number of stories in here that you've heard before, but they were still good. The other thing then is that this book basically has a message of, you know, motherhood can throw all different things at you, and all you can do is do your best, and that whatever's right for you and your family is wonderful, and that you make the decisions you make because of the experiences that you've had. And it's sort of a very kind, compassionate, a very fair way of looking at things. She talks about her difficult first birth experience with Darcy, which you know, is there's a bit of a trigger warning as well. It's not nice. And then about how from that she then went on to have a really amazing birth experience with her second child, and how different they were and why they were different, and the support that she had with the second birth, and all this kind of stuff. And so I think she approaches everything really, really fairly, and, you know, she has a lovely way of writing. So then she writes about infant feeding, which obviously is a topic close to my heart, and she breastfed Darcy for a couple of weeks, and she breastfed Pearl once, I think, after she was born. It's really clear from reading the book why she made the decisions that she did, and why those were the right decisions for her. I think she handles it all very fairly and talks about how everybody's different and all of that stuff. So I think she handles all of it really well. There's not really any information about breastfeeding in here because she didn't really breastfeed her babies for very long. But, and I don't have any issue with that, and I think she handled it really well. However, a few times in the book she uses the phrase "fed is best," which I really don't like. Now, I completely understand why Louise might find that phrase comforting, because at the time when she had Darcy, breast is best was still kind of a phrase that was used a lot. It was when I had my eldest, who's 10. And when that phrase was being used, and by the way, I really don't like that phrase either. So when breast is best was being used a lot, and then if you can't breastfeed, if breast is best, then you feel inadequate by not being able to. And the same goes for if you struggle, which was my situation. So that phrase, and the fact that it was so ubiquitous, was really hard. And I can understand in that situation that actually going, no, breast isn't best, fed is best. I understand that completely. However, I still really hate the phrase. And the reason for that is that I just think saying fed is best is way too low of a bar to say. That it's a bit like when people say all that matters is you have a healthy baby. And of course that matters. And of course the baby being fed matters. That matters massively. Of course that's important. But it's not best. Best is being supported, feeling that you were well informed, well supported, and that therefore the decisions that you made were absolutely right for you, and that you understand the journey that you've been on, and you feel fairly treated and all of that. That's what's best. So, and you can't boil that down to like a snappy phrase. Breast isn't best for everybody, and it doesn't do anybody any favours, that phrase. I mean, people are trying things like breast is normal, but that doesn't really work either. So I think we just forget all these snappy phrases. They don't work. Fed is best is just dismissive of all of the things that are really difficult in our society. And it's fed isn't enough. Fed is absolutely important. Like, don't get me wrong, of course it's important. But it's too dismissive of a phrase. And so actually what we need is like, fed is really important, but also women should feel supported and well informed in their infant feeding decisions. I don't think that's snappy enough. So it was one of those where I felt that she handled it really well. I felt her writing was really well, but her use of the phrase just made me go, oh, don't like that. But nonetheless, I still really liked the book. She only said it about 3 times, so I'm not going to make that big a deal, says she after just talking about it for the last 5 minutes. But it's still a good book. Basically, if you have followed Louise for a while, or at all, if you watch Louise's channel, I think you'll find this book really interesting. And if you don't follow Louise's channel, but you're interested in kind of, you know, a memoir and a reflective story about birth, then you still might really enjoy it. Trigger warning, like I said, for birth stories and also abuse. And actually what I haven't said is the fact that Louise has contributed all of her royalties to the NSPCC because of the theme of abuse within this book. It's really emotional. Her mum died when she was young, and the way she writes about that is just stunning. So I really liked it, I really enjoyed it, but I just wanted to make those little points, even though it's still a good book. So, the next book that I read was while I was still coldy and miserable, and I wanted a, you know, easy to read, simple book. So I went for this. I picked this up from a charity shop, and I have seen the film, but I've never read the book. This is Marley and Me by John Grogan. I enjoyed the film, but it's not like up there as one of my favourite films or anything, but I did enjoy it. But it didn't, I mean, it made me cry, but it didn't like get under my skin, if you know what I mean. But I was interested, oh, my feet have gone to sleep. I was interested, I was interested in reading the actual book. Now, I had no idea that it was actually a true story until I started reading this, and I was like, oh, it's actually his dog. I thought it was some fictional dog. So that changed everything for me, realising that this was not a fictional story. If you haven't seen the film or read the book, Marley and Me is essentially the story of a family and their dog Marley. And Marley is like the naughtiest dog in the world. So there's lots of funny stories in it, but it's obviously very warm. When they get the dog, it's before they have children, so they then have their children. It's like this family growing and the experiences that they have and the dog. And so obviously all of that is right on my street, because I like family stuff and I've got a dog. So, again, I read this in a really short space of time and it was just lovely. It did break my heart a little bit though, because as Marley starts to get older in it, and I was like, oh, my dog, I wonder where she is. Dolly! Come and say hello to the people, to your people, your audience. This is Dolly. Dolly, they can't see you. They can't see you. Say hello. Say hello, I'm Dolly. This is Dolly. Oh, she stinks. So, she's leaving again. Oh. So, I wanted to call her up here. Because I have my own dog, and Dolly is our first, settle down, is our first family dog. So my husband and I both grew up with dogs, but Dolly is our first dog as a couple. So it's a very similar story to this. Dolly, she keeps looking at me because I keep saying her name. She is 8. She's coming up for 9, aren't you? She's starting to go a bit grey and she's starting to slow down. So Dolly was also a really naughty puppy. She's always been house trained. She was a rescue, and she was about 6 months old when we got her. Oh, don't start licking. Dolly. But she, sort of behaviour-wise, she's a Staffy boxer cross, so she's just nuts, and she was just high energy and used to run away a lot and was a bit of a nightmare. So I do identify with much of this book and with the slowing down of her, and it's just sad. So I would say that if you haven't read this before, I know lots of people have, it's a lovely true story of a family loving their dog, and if you love a dog, then you will love this book. But about the last 50 pages were absolutely heartbreaking, much more so than the film, and I definitely would read the book again, where I might not necessarily watch the film again. And this has given me a whole new, maybe I would like to watch the film again, because realising that it's a real dog that matters to me a lot. So yeah, it's a true story, and it's just lovely. That's going up there in my favourite books about dogs. Maybe I should make a video about my favourite books about dogs. Let me know if you would enjoy that video. Right, the next book I read in October was this one, The 100-Foot Journey by Richard C. Murray. Is that how you say that? I'm not sure. This was another book from my friend Laura, who found she gives me books. She gives me books she wants me to read for her. But this one she found on the side of the road. Somebody was giving away some books. So this is one of the books from her. And this is an interesting one because I did enjoy it, but it's a bit weird. So this is about a boy called Hassan Haji, and he is from Mumbai. And him and his family end up having to move to England initially, and then to France. And then in France, the family settle, and a lot of the book then focuses on what happens in France. So a lot of the book is about food and the different kinds of cuisine, and it's very, don't read this if you're hungry, but I mean, you've got all of like the amazing food in Mumbai. The England part of it's quite short, so I forget in that bit, other than talking about the food that's sold at Harrods. In in France, it's all about the food, and then it goes on, it's about like the restaurant business. Did you know, I only recently found this out, that the word is not restaurateur, it's restaurateur. Who knew? Probably everyone, but I didn't. It's one of those ones that you misread, you just assume there's an N in it. There isn't an N in it. Who knew? So, it's all about the boy's journey to being a restaurateur. Sorry, the dog keeps sighing and moving around. I should never have invited her up here. So, I loved the cultural side to this book. I love books with a sense of travel. So all of kind of the experience of Mumbai and then again of France, I really enjoyed. So I was hoping that this book would be a case of the boy from Mumbai bringing like the flavours of his childhood to French cuisine and challenging, because I think it's set in the past at some point, I'm not even sure, and sort of bringing all of that together and challenging, you know, current thoughts about flavour and culture, and I was hoping it would be that, and it wasn't. It becomes more and more about just French cuisine and French culture, and the Indian side of things just kind of gets lost, which I thought was a shame. Also, I felt that the story became a bit aimless, and when it reached its culmination, it didn't... Everything was like a sort of a mention of, well, and this happened, and then that happened, and then there wasn't like a point. Like, if you see what I mean, like everything sort of comes together and it's like a satisfying, you know, ending. It just, some things happened, if that makes sense. So I did really like this book. I mean, I was just very hungry. I liked it. I was interested in the characters. The characterisation is lovely. I never thought I'd be interested in a book about restaurants and food, but it, you know, that side of things was great. But yeah, those were just my two little criticisms. I just would have liked I don't want to give spoilers, but the main thing that happens at the end of the book to have more bearing on other things, you know, so sort of everything reaches some kind of culmination. Not necessarily that all the ends are tied up, but just that there's a thing. And there wasn't. Brilliant. Well done, Emma. So, yeah, I liked it, but I think I gave it 3 stars. It's more like a 3.5, because I like the writing and I like the characterisation. But, yeah. So then, the last book that I read this month was The Familiars by Stacey Halls. I've seen this around loads. It's beautiful. The cover is absolutely stunning. And I walked into Burgate Books, which is on my last vlog that you can have a look at. And this was literally sat right there, and I was like, oh, actually, I've wanted to read that for a while. Well, actually, I was interested in it, but I had no idea that, again, it's about birth. So I was like, yes, I just like the cover. So this book is about a lady called Fleetwood Shuttleworth. First of all, how amazing is the name Fleetwood? Second of all, does the name Fleetwood make anybody else think of Guybrush Threepwood? Or is that just me? Maybe I played too much Monkey Island when I was younger. Anyway, this is about Fleetwood and how she's young, she's about 17, she's married to a guy called Richard. They are very, very wealthy landowners in like 1600s. And I was going to say Fleetwood is pregnant, and she believes that the pregnancy will not continue, or that she'll lose the baby, or that she'll die, or, you know, she's really, really worried about this pregnancy. And she comes across a really quite mysterious woman in the woods, and as time goes on, their lives kind of start to twine together more and more. This lady, Alice, she is a midwife, and Fleetwood decides that she would like Alice to be her midwife and that she trusts her. And it's a story basically of how their lives intertwine. And I read this mostly on Halloween. I read probably about 300 of the 400 pages on Halloween because we were driving and it was something to do in the car. And this was such a good book for Halloween because I'm not one for really scary stories, but because, so what I didn't mention is that there are also witches. There are the Pendle witches, and so there's like a witch hunt going on as well. So there's this whole like slightly mysterious, are these women witches, or is this a case of these are like wise women? Are they being hounded because of the patriarchy? Like, what is this? Or are they actually witches? What's the whole deal with their familiars? And all those kind of questions. So it's got like a little spooky Halloween-y feel to it, but without actually being scary or a horror book or anything like that. So for me, this was a great Halloween read, and I may well read it again next Halloween because I liked it. It's got lovely characterisation. It's got a great story. There's a few little bits of it that read a little bit YA-ish, and not that I've got a problem with that, it's just not generally my thing, but on the whole, it didn't. I really liked the themes. I liked the themes of motherhood and women and all of that stuff. And what I also really liked is I didn't realise that it was based on real people. So there really was a Fleetwood Shuttleworth. It was Shuttleworth, wasn't it? I think so. I used to live near the Shuttleworth collection. Shout out for the Shuttleworth collection. She was a real woman. There was a real Alice. There were the real Pendle witches. But not a lot is known about any of those people. So this is just like a dramatisation made up about real people, which I thought was really interesting actually. So yeah, I would recommend this for a just a nice, quite intricate tale with a little bit of sort of teeny bit of feminism, teeny bit of witchiness, and yeah, nice sort of Halloween-y, autumny vibes to it, and also just so that you can stroke the cover. It's rather lovely. So that is everything that I read. As usual, a bit of variation in amongst it all, but I enjoyed reading 6 books. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought. As I say, I rate my books depending on how I enjoy them, but so you know, everybody feels differently about books, so let me know. As always, if you've got any recommendations for things that you think I might like, then let me know. But yeah, I hope you're all okay. What am I reading at the moment? Oh, a book about gin. I don't even drink gin, but there we go. So yeah, I hope you're all okay. I hope you're all bearing up with the current situation. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon for another one. Take care.